Manda tudo, eu vou fazer tudo.
Eu vou tirar aqui, a gente
Não,
tira do seu.
faz sim, faz sim, faz sim.
Isso ainda é maravilhoso, é iPhone, né?
É, esse aqui é, beleza.
Não tem como.
Esse aqui, ó. E é o nosso acessível top que você quer, dobra. Então,
Em nome da reitora da Universidade de Brasília, Presidente Joseph R, boa estadia nessa universidade, agradecer imensamente a sua disposição de vir aqui conversar com os estudantes, né, com os professores, porque eu acho que essa é a questão mais importante do estudo, né, que é exatamente esse curso, né, dos nossos trabalhos, fazem a gente existir exatamente para aqui por conta disso, né. Eu gostaria de dizer, né, que como já estou dizendo, a Universidade de Brasília é a primeira universidade federal a ter as portas, né, para leis e registros, informação informativa muito concludente na universidade, no país que nós temos, né, mais de 50% da população negra. Notava essa iniciativa nas universidades, a Universidade de Brasília completa 20 anos esse ano, né, de questão das portas. E, nesse sentido, todas as ações ligadas a direitos humanos foram dando sequência nessa universidade por conta exatamente da questão afirmativa. Né? Nós temos hoje, né, a Secretaria de Direitos Humanos, que foi criada há 11 meses pela universidade, e que tem trabalhado com a preocupação em implementar, em criar, né, e zelar pelas ações afirmativas dentro da universidade. E, nesse sentido, a gente tem tido, né, os mais concluentes, primeiro, a coordenação negra, que tem trabalhado, né, nesse apoio, nesses três direitos, aqui não só entrada, né, como ações afirmativas, principalmente ligadas a mudanças epistemológicas dentro da universidade, dentro do conjunto dos professores. Temos uma coordenação indígena também, que tem feito esse mesmo trabalho, uma coordenação LGBT+, e uma coordenação das mulheres. Né? Nós temos muito felizes nesse momento, também poucas palavras, mas muito não só com a presença, então também com as mudanças que a partir, né, de janeiro tivemos aqui no país, e principalmente o retorno do plano de ação conjunta para eliminar a discriminação racial no Brasil, que é um né, de retorno, que é, na verdade, uma possibilidade de troca, né, de informações que nós aqui no Brasil temos em relação, né, não só aos Estados Unidos, como em relação a todos os outros países. Né? Eu acho que nós temos aqui no Brasil uma tradição, né, no movimento negro, né, uma tradição de discutir a questão racial, de informação sobre a questão racial, e achamos que é fundamental a importância o retorno e a troca de experiências, troca de possibilidades né, dos nossos alunos e nossos professores, fazendo intercâmbios, como também de discussões mais aprofundadas sobre a questão racial. Eu acho que é uma troca, né, nossa laicar, eu acho que a própria professora Angela bem fala, né, da importância que nós temos também de estar influenciando políticas lá, principalmente em relação à discussão sobre as mulheres negras, né, e também temos, claro, o nosso apoio à discussão, né, de mudanças que são feitas exatamente por instituições dos Estados Unidos. Né? Então, seja bem-vinda, só uma primeira palavra, seja bem, esperamos a sua volta, esperamos a volta e a sua vida, e agradeço também o nosso embaixador dos Estados Unidos aqui no Brasil, como eu fiz, assim, né? Então, que a gente tenha uma boa reunião de conversa. Tá? Obrigada.
Obrigado, professora Débora. Thank you very much, Professor Débora. Also, the idea was to make it as informal as possible because we are talking to your experience with students. So, as we have arranged, we have already some authority here to have students, mainly because this event is for that. So, just to, all questions and then we can follow on the experience of the students. Do you want to say anything in the beginning or only just?
Well, let me just say how delighted I am to be here with you and to see this extraordinarily diverse audience here. As the professor was introducing us, she used the term that I haven't heard for years in the United States, affirmative action. And I used to always say, when people ask me how I got to where I got, I would say I'm an affirmative action agent. Because it was through our affirmative action programs to encourage African Americans to access the institutions of higher learning in the United States that I got to go to Louisiana State University. And it was because of those programs that I was able to achieve this success. So I like the term affirmative action, and I appreciate that that is what you are doing here, because it is only through making those affirmative actions that you can make progress.
Thank you. So we make it easier for me. The first question is for Ursula. So I've had a 40-year career as a diplomat, serving as the Director General of Foreign Service, U.S. Ambassador to Liberia, Assistant Secretary of State for African Affairs, and now U.S. Representative to the United Nations. You've spoken about your humble beginnings, growing up in the segregated South, about being the descendant of enslaved people. How did you come to this career, and how did your upbringing influence your career path? What would you advise our students to focus on in their preparation for the professional life? We have many students, as Professor said, that also come from a very humble environment and are now having to deal with these challenges.
Thank you. That's an extraordinarily interesting question for me, because when I've been asked this question before, I don't really know the answer. What I know is that the first chapter of my life, coming from a poor, impoverished family, in which both my parents were under and uneducated. My father, in fact, was illiterate. My mother stopped school in 8th grade and eventually got what is called her GED, her graduate education degree, when she was in her 50s. So that chapter really doesn't translate to this chapter, where I am the United Nations, the U.S. Ambassador to the United Nations. So I do ask myself that question all the time. How did I get from the first chapter to the current chapter I am in right now? And I think it goes back to my parents, who were extraordinary victims of racism in the South, but who wanted their children to have a better life than they had. And so they worked to give us that life. And honestly, I didn't really know I was poor until I left my community. Because everybody else was like me. And it was only when I went off to college that I realized how disadvantaged I was. And that realization really put what I like to refer as a burden on me, and that burden was to succeed. Failure was not an option. And I say that to you young people who come from disadvantaged backgrounds. You're going to have to carry this burden of success, this burden where you can't take time off to just fail. You're going to have to keep moving forward, and I'm happy that I had that kind of approach to life. And then my other approach was just to be flexible about what I wanted to achieve. So I started out wanting to be a lawyer because that's kind of all I knew. I used teachers and lawyers in the profession. And I didn't want to be a teacher, so I decided I wanted to be a lawyer. But a door opened for me to go into academics. And I went into that open door. And I was excited about academics. And then another door opened for me to go into the diplomatic service. And I didn't have a clue what I was going to find behind that door. But here's what I found. I found a career that was extraordinarily rewarding, that allowed me to travel around the world, to engage with people and leaders from around the world. Occasionally, I pinch myself because I'm talking to heads of state in Africa who all call me Linda, and who see me as a friend. And I think about the little girl occasionally who's running around barefoot in Louisiana with no sense of ambition, no options in life, but who found a path to where I am today. So my message to all of you is move forward, go through open doors that you hadn't intended to go through, because you don't know what you're going to find behind those open doors. And you might find something you're not interested in, you can come back out and keep going in the direction you plan to go in. But be flexible about your lives and your futures, and you will find your place in this world. And we need you to find your place in this world, because my generation is leaving you with tremendous challenges and burdens. You're going to have to be dealing with climate change. We didn't fix that for you. You're going to have to deal with issues of peace and security and population and migration. So we need you to go through those doors and help us build a future for the generation that comes after you.
Well, one of the doors that open was of the organizations to deal with those problems. We will take that message that multilateralism, as we know it now, is equipped to deal with this problem.
Secretary Albright, one of my predecessors, the late Secretary Albright, said if we didn't have the United Nations, we would create it. So it is not a perfect institution. It's flawed. It was built 70 years ago to deal with issues of peace and security that didn't include climate change and major migrations and terrorism as we know it did. So I do think the multilateral system is important, but it also needs to be rejiggered. It has to be reformed so that it can continue to deal with the challenges that we're facing today.
One of the key issues is food insecurity. What do you think that Brazil and the U.S. can do to solve this, to face these challenges together and to help get this problem?
I don't know if you're aware, Professor, that has been one of my biggest priorities since I arrived in New York in February of 21. In March, during my presidency, we started with a signature event on food insecurity because we were seeing the impact of the pandemic, of COVID, of climate, and conflict on food security around the world. And then fast forward 1 year later, the war in Ukraine that exacerbated the situation and made the food insecurity situation even more dire. So this is something we do have to address. People should not in this world of abundance go to bed hungry. Brazil is a net producer of food. You know, how do you support countries that are not net producers? I was at the city's summit last week and met several mayors from Brazil, and they talked about the fact that Brazil is a producer. And this is something that we have had discussions with your government on, because you're now an elected member of the Security Council. And we have talked about food insecurity as a priority in the Security Council. And it's clear that it is an issue that is burdening people all around the world. When you look at countries on the continent of Africa who were more than 50% dependent on grains coming from Russia and Ukraine. And now the prices have quadrupled. We have to fix these issues. And what I heard from your mayors is you're in a position to be an exporter, to help address some of these problems, not just in exporting food, but exporting capacity and technology on how to produce more food for countries that may not have that capacity. So we have a lot of work to do to work on food insecurity. We had a ministerial on the issue last year here in Honolulu in New York. More than 100 countries signed commitments to address food insecurity, and we can't stop until this is no longer an issue that is a threat.
As you know, one of the SDGs is zero hunger. It was inspired in Brazilian public policy. We are, now that Brazil is back, right, I'm sure that there is a special interest in fostering this. But there are another 16 SDGs. What is the goal of SDGs in facing those global challenges in your opinion? And what could our countries do together to help meet the 2030 challenge?
2030, you know, when that date was announced, it seemed like it was a long, long way away. It's now only 7 years away. And only about 15% of the SDGs have made any progress. So we have to ramp up our efforts if we want to ensure a future for people around the world, a future without poverty, a future in which climate change is being addressed, a future in which hunger is being addressed. All of these SDGs are important. And so over the next, I would say, 2 to 3 years, our efforts are going to really need to have a fire lit under them. The fact that Brazil has been so, I would say, aggressive in moving forward, and again, meeting with your mayors last week and hearing how they are addressing the important issues of the SDGs, I thought was significant, because mayors are at the level of the people. Policies are made up here at the national level, but it's the subnational level, it's mayors that really ensure that those policies are implemented to people that they are responsible for. So I was very impressed and hopeful having met with the mayors from across the world that they are all committed, but particularly with those committed to seeing this move forward.
Okay, this deals with human security, but as you know better than us, the United Nations also has to deal with international security. Then we have many instruments for trade, the fact that this organization that was created to free all generations from this cause of war, is not capable of stopping war in Yemen, Syria, or in Ukraine. Do do you think that reforming the Security Council will help enhance the capacity of the United Nations to face the challenges, to reinvigorate the faith that we have in the organization?
You know, again, this organization was created 70 years ago, and the world has changed. I said that earlier. And so we do support reform of the organization. You heard that I say during the speech at high level week last year that we support additional elected as well as permanent members of the Security Council from Latin America, Caribbean, as well as Africa. And over the course since September, I have been holding a series of listening tours among the regions to talk about how they see Security Council reform, Security Council expansion taking place. And we are working with our partners and with our colleagues to move that agenda forward, because we know that in order to deal with today's challenges of peace and security, we need a more representative, a more inclusive Security Council.
Thank you, Madam. Well, I was here just to break the ice. The idea is that to have a conversation with students. So
Now for the hard question.
yes, now for the hard question. So please, the floor is open. I will just ask whoever is going to hold the question to get to the podium and introduce yourself, saying you are students, professor, open for us. Please feel free to get the mic. Just go. It's a very important Se vocês puderem fazer a pergunta em português, é possível, vai ser possível perguntar.
Good morning. Good morning.
Good morning.
Thank you so much for this presentation. I was just nervous. Hopefully everything comes out right. I wrote my question. So my name is Javier. I'm a PhD student in international relations here, and I'm a part of a project called LATI, which is translated as Laboratory of Opportunity Studies in International Relations.
Laboratory of International Studies
Of Opportunity Studies, yes, international relations. We have been studying and researching about the role of race and racism in international relations, based mostly on Black folks' experiences. And then according to some core assumptions of international relations and work policy, this is a realm of hypos, we call hypos, and identity is different. There is a long tradition that says that identity is different in Black, being who you are, who you are treated as local. And over the years, it has changed. It's important, but it's still not that important for this realm. And here in the university, we are dealing with theory mostly, but some practice. And you can use this in practice. So I can help myself by asking you the question, like for people who are speaking for the students of this project. Do you ever feel like they want to take the question out of you in this time? Policy place. What has been in your life? So it's that it's been, thank you so much. It's a very important morning for our people. Thank you so much.
What has my journey been like? You know, and thank you for that question. I am an extraordinarily proud Black woman. I've never felt that there were efforts or attempts to take my Blackness away from me, because it can't be done. Or let me just say, the only way it can be done is if you allow that to happen. And I would never allow that to happen. And when I walk into any room, in the Security Council, in meetings that I have across the globe. I walk in the room first as the representative of the United States, who happens to be Black and happens to be a woman. But I never feel that I'm diminished in that role. My view, and I've said it many times before, that racism is the problem of the races unless you allow it to become your problem. And when you allow it to become your problem, that's when it starts to diminish you. Now, I know that's a bit naive. If you're attacked on the streets, you're barred from entering a facility or going to a university. These are things you cannot control. But what you can control is how you will allow it to impact you. Your first option is to fight back, and the second is to look for alternatives. And so I have spent my life fighting back and looking for alternatives. And I think it's worked for me, and that's what I would encourage you to do. Racism exists. It cannot be denied. And I find, having grown up in the racist South, that the worst kind of racism that I have experienced is by people who don't know their race. Because you can deal with people who are openly and they're racist. They're not hiding it. The people I found the hardest to deal with are those who didn't realize they were racist and would do racist things and feel insulted if you called out their racism. But I also believe you have to call it out. But thank you.
Okay, good morning. My name is Sarah. First of all, it's such a pleasure to be able to talk to you like this. I actually have two questions. First of all, I am representing a group called IREL, the Fight Charter and Latin. Marias means Academic Women in International Relations and Social Activism. So our main goal is to study gender and international relations, and outside of the university, we also make some events to share with the community what we are studying, to give back, and to empower women. And I would like to know, considering your position and your role as a Black woman, do you have anything that you think is fundamental to get more women like you in positions of power like yours? Because in Brazil, it's really hard to get women in diplomacy. There's all the factors like in the process. There are also external factors such as maternity and many factors that affect only women and make it harder for us to get there. And I want to know if there is anything that you think is fundamental to get more women in diplomacy besides politics, I guess. And the other question is more personal. You mentioned about how you get to a point after going out, leaving your family, going to study, and there's the whole, I have to succeed and I cannot fail. And for us, in my experience, I am not from here. I'm kind of far away from home. I don't have family here. I don't have a support network here, and sometimes it's kind of really hard to keep going. And I want to know what motivated you. Where did you get strength to keep going and to not fail? And how did you get there? It's so hard sometimes. And I don't know, thinking that I have to succeed all the time sometimes makes it harder. Than I don't know if you have any message for us?
Well, first to your first question on how to get more women into senior positions. It's being role model. It's women seeing other women and saying, okay, if she can do it, I can do it. So we have to get more role models out there. So I do spend a lot of time at university. It's not really in my job description. I go to high schools because I didn't have someone like me coming to my high school to tell me about these possibilities. So I really do take it seriously that I have to be a role model because women see it, then they can be it. She did it, I can do it. So that's my recommendation, and just look at the options and go for it. Your frustrations were my frustrations when I was your age. And I described success as a burden. It absolutely was a burden. There were times when I thought, I really just want to hang out and have fun and be with my friends and, do bad things that my friends did and then come out of it and then do what I want to do. I never did that. I never took the fun route. I was always very focused on what I had to achieve. I do tell young people now, kind of stop and sell the roses, because I regret that I did not stop to sell the roses. And I have 2 children. I raised 2 children in the Foreign Service. They traveled with me